Russian energy dependence is the aim of a new roadmap presented by the European Commission. The executive cites security reasons, adding that we also allow for better price control and the promotion of renewable energy in the EU. EU Decoded explains the objectives and the obstacles of the new RepowerEU roadmap.
Europe began to move away from its energy dependence on Russia after the large-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. The war led to a spike in energy prices, and the EU has since reduced its imports. Oil has fallen from 27% to 3%, gas has fallen from 45% to 19%. Coal, which then accounted for 50% of EU consumption, has been banned entirely by sanctions. The EU executive now wants to phase out all such imports by 2027.
Nevertheless, the EU continues to contribute to Russia's budgets. Energy imports in 2024 brought in 23 billion euros to Moscow's coffers. We asked some Europeans about the end of these imports.
Magyarországon amennyire én tudom, nincsenek meg a feltételei jelenleg annak, hogy máshonnan is komoly mennyiségű gázt importáljunk.
Akkor azt gondolom, hogy ez egy olyan dolog, hogy hajlandó vagyok többet fizetni azért, hogy ez a konfliktus véget érjen.
Háborút, meg a minden, ez gazdasági kérdés. Az egész.
We should be looking externally for these things. I mean, why would we be sending money to countries that are hurting other countries?
Europe does need gas, and finding new sources of gas probably is not as simple as going from day one to day two.
I think, yes, we have to come up with a way to be sustainable, but I think Europe doesn't have the means to do that for the time being. We are still dependent.
Euronews reporter Jorge Liboreiro has been following the EU's disengagement with Russia. What's the relation between the sanctions on Russian fuels and this new RepowerEU roadmap?
Well, it's related, but it's very different. We have to say sanctions are a foreign policy instrument that is used mainly to curtail the revenues that Russia earns to then fund the war of aggression against Ukraine. Now, the RepowerEU, the main objective is to end the dependency that we have on Russian fuels. So the logic is the same, but the roadmap is trade and energy policy. So this is very important because it means it doesn't require the unanimity that sanctions require.
Which countries are likely to oppose the phase-out of Russian fuels?
Hungary and Slovakia, nobody would be surprised to know this. They are still reliant on Russian fuels. They say that the phase-out from Russia will increase prices, will make prices more volatile for consumers and companies, and they also say it violates the sovereign right of every member state to choose their energy mix.
But because we don't need unanimity, it will be easy to pass this?
Exactly. I think this is why the Commission is trying this new way, with trade and energy policy to bypass any individual vetoes that we might see in the future.
How does the Commission intend to break these contracts with Russia, and what could be the risks for the companies in this sector?
Well, there are risks because the contracts with Russian companies are usually long-term. They cover many years. So if you break the contract, you have to pay penalties for breaking the contract. So what the Commission is saying that by imposing these bans, this prohibition on gas from Russia, the companies will have a strong excuse to invoke what is known as force majeure, which allows a company, a client, to break the contract without facing any penalties because there's a circumstance that it's beyond their control.
The RepowerEU roadmap proposes a ban on new short-term contracts for pipeline gas and LNG by the end of 2025, a ban on imports of these gases under existing long-term contracts by the end of 2027, new restrictions to phase out imports of uranium, enriched uranium, and other nuclear materials, no new contracts with Russian suppliers co-signed by the Euratom Supply Agency. Around a third of EU member states will be affected. Russian gas reaches 10 southern, central, and eastern countries. Oil is used only by Hungary and Slovakia. Nuclear materials and services are used in 7 countries.
Our guest is Svetlana Penkova, a Bulgarian socialist that is also one of the vice chairs of the European Committee on Industry, Research and Energy. Does the EU have a sufficient safety net to avoid major disruptions in the market, including high prices, by cutting totally the Russian energy?
So we've been trying to cut off the dependencies, create enough storage, find alternative suppliers and routes to ensure that the European industry and our households would not suffer from those shocks. We've done a lot in terms of legislative framework. Of course, there is still more to be done, given that the dependency was quite high, but we've cut in terms of the volumes that we use.
Could the EU be creating new dependencies, particularly from the gas coming from the United States, with which we have a trade war ongoing?
Well, that's one of the traps that we can fall into. Once we're trying to switch from one dependency, we shouldn't be falling into another. Basically, diversification and risk reduction means that we really need to have many more suppliers and not put all of our eggs into one basket. I'll give one example of a country that was very responsive in terms of the alternative gas supply that we needed with the start of the war. This was Azerbaijan. They were the first one actually to proactively offer additional supplies of natural gas to the EU, and they're also increased their production capacity almost twice to be able to meet the increasing demand from the EU.
And finally, how successful is the EU in transitioning to renewable energy when the European Green Deal is increasingly watered down?
I think the European Green Deal set the infrastructure and the framework which makes it possible now to be speaking about the industrial deal. When we're speaking about energy stability and predictability of prices, we really need to be very clear that we need a balanced energy mix. A balanced energy mix means renewable energy sources and baseload power. I'm really happy that the moods towards nuclear energy in the EU are changing in a positive direction now, because to ensure the stability in the energy system, we really do need baseload power, which in this case the only future option for the Union is investing in nuclear energy.
Madam Penkova, thank you very much for your contribution. The European Commission stated that it wants to stop filling the Kremlin's war chest. The President Ursula von der Leyen even said no more Russian fuels forever. But some member states would like to resume business with Russia after the war, which could lead to lower energy prices. The European Union is walking a tightrope between protecting economy and ensuring security.